Well, there's a golden rule in politics. Only when you're sick of saying it do the public really start to hear it. Victoria and Australia are now waking up to this economic and psychological vandal, Daniel Andrews. But an Andrews by another name, Kevin Andrews, the former Defence Minister and the longest-serving member of the Federal Parliament, who I might add recently lost pre-selection in Victoria, Kevin Andrews addressed the Daniel Andrews megalomania, people who have inflated self-esteem and overestimate their power and their beliefs. Kevin Andrews identified all of this in a brilliant piece of writing last year when he wrote, and I quote, "I never thought I'd live in a police state. Surely democratic Australia would remain a bastion of freedom in which any restrictions were a last resort, applied precisely, consistently and proportionately to a clearly identified threat. That," he wrote, "can no longer be said in the state of Victoria." Kevin Andrews, the still federal member of the seat of Menzies in the federal parliament, joins me. I might add, he's been in the national parliament since 1991 and has served it unselfishly. So, Kevin Andrews, welcome and thank you for your time. And as I said, congratulations on a splendid and unselfish political career. Kevin, we all feel we've been living in a police state. It's just that Victoria takes it to a North Korean dimension. Are we losing democratic Australia?
Well, we're in danger of it when we see these sorts of practices and actions put in place by Premier Andrews in Victoria. I mean, this is a man who, through his bureaucrats, essentially closed down the Parliament of Victoria, who ignored for most of the time the normal processes of cabinet and just had a hand-selected group of people, and has put in place dictates to the people of Victoria, which, as you say, are not precise, they're not consistent, and they're not proportional or proportionate to the risks involved.
I mean,
look at the situation now.
Yeah, go on, Kevin.
Well, look at the situation now. You know, you've got some outbreaks in certain suburbs of Melbourne. Why should the people hundreds of kilometres away in Mildura or Portland or, for God's sake, up in the high country at Omeo or Ensay be subject to the same restrictions as people in the very areas where these infections are occurring? It's
Kevin,
not proportionate.
It's not proportionate, but only because the answer to your question is this bloke is the dictator. You wrote last year about Andrews, movement where possible was restricted to a 5-kilometre radius. Businesses were closed for weeks, jobs destroyed. The state parliament was closed on the orders of a mid-ranking bureaucrat. What sort of show are we running? You said a pregnant woman arrested in her own home for posting a Facebook page and surveillance cameras set up in public parks. How can Daniel Andrews and his government be allowed to get away with this, Kevin?
Well, these are all the hallmarks of a totalitarian mentality. Yep. Andrews corrals fear and alarm. Every time he gives one of his 100-minute-long press conferences, which went on day after day after day last year, it was all about engendering fear in the community. A democratic leader should be about inspiring hope, not engendering fear in the community. People are looking for hope. But what this does is it sets Victorians up against Victorians, that people in the city fearful of people elsewhere in their own city, people in the country fearful of people who live in the city, etc., etc. This is a very bizarre and indeed very unfortunate development, and you can see from this that people become scared, they become more alarmed, and then on top of that, more fear is piled on by the Premier every day. And this is a very tragic development.
Yeah, and no one responsible. I mean, we've had virtual Royal Commission. No one's responsible.
No one's responsible. You may recall, or not recall, but know, Alan, that President Truman, the American president, had a sign on his desk which said, "The buck stops here." Well, I don't know what the sign on Dan Andrews' desk is. It must be that the buck is with anybody else but me. But then, he's the Premier of this state. Absolutely. He's not responsible. The Police Commissioner's not responsible. The Health Minister's not responsible. The Commissioner for Emergency Services is not responsible. The Chief Public Health Officer is not responsible. Nobody in Victoria is responsible for this mess, and yet Dan Andrews occupies the highest political office in the state, and he says, "Oh no, I'm not responsible."
Mm. Well, now I've got one final question. Without notice, you're used to questions without notice. You've been an outstanding servant of the electorate, for the electorate of Menzies, for all those years in the Victorian Parliament. You have written brilliantly. You're still one of the genuine and true conservatives and liberal thinkers. Why not take over the Liberal Party in the state parliament before the next election, Kevin? and give to Daniel Andrews what you believe he needs?
Well, those matters are obviously for the members of the Liberal Party themselves, so I'm not going to presume that. I love your compliment, Alan, but between now and the next election, I'm going to continue to enthusiastically and hopefully with due humility continue to represent not only the people of Menzies but the people of Australia.
Good on you. Well, look, congratulations, a brilliant piece of writing, and I mean, if you led the Liberal Party to a state election with those ideas, you'd romp it in. Kevin Andrews' great strength, as he knows what true liberalism stands for, and the public are crying out for someone with those values. Kevin, thank you for talking to us. There he is, the federal member for the seat of Menzies, Kevin Andrews.